They'd be like, well, we want you to do this mindset stuff. I'm like, I don't need the mindset stuff. I need to know what's profitable so I can go sell more of it.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel Petitpas. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm excited today to be joined by a friend. I mean, we've run in similar circles for a number of years now, but we got to meet and hang out in Austin, Texas recently, where we shared the stage at an event with our good friend Jason Swank and the crew over at Agency Mastery 360. He is the founder of Video Case Story. He's the author of an incredible book, Video Testimonials That Land the Big Fish. I have it on my nightstand, and I'm about to read it. I promise you, Ian. He's produced over 15,000 videos, and special asterisks here, without the use of AI. He's the host of a great podcast called The Garlic Marketing Show, which will be linked in the show notes below. So with all of that, Ian, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having my book on your nightstand. That's literally my goal, is just on every marketer's nightstand to have a book.
Well, yours is there, and I think about you before I go to bed every night, and it's there to remind me of our friendship. And so I'm grateful for that. I know you very well, but a lot of people listening might not. So let's start with, who you are and who you serve.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been in marketing now, in marketing agency life for almost 20 years. Jesus. I started with a big Fortune 50 company as a marketing consultant. Before that, I was in commercial real estate in New York City. I've done a lot in my past, and then I just loved marketing and went to work for attorneys doing marketing consulting. Love that. But when YouTube was purchased by Google, I was like, this is going to change everything. It took about 10 years before everyone realized that was happening. So we kind of had to sneak YouTube in there for people. But then eventually the agency evolved, and, we can talk about this today because I evolved the agency. It has several iterations, mostly because I constantly refined what we were doing and found out what had the biggest impact, what we could do the best, had the, good margins for us, and would retain clients the longest. And that was Video Case Stories. We still do all sorts of YouTube marketing. We work with attorneys, but we also work a lot with agencies, both as clients and partners, helping them land big clients through YouTube and through their customer stories, and replace their selling process, and also retain clients longer with YouTube and Video Case Stories. So I've been doing that, written a couple of books, done the podcasts. I'm up to close to 600 episodes. I wish I would have had a service like yours. I literally probably would be retired right now if I had your service 10 years ago. So, so I've made all the mistakes too. So everything that you see is because it's honed down to what really works.
Amazing. And you can retire now that I paid you to say that on my show. Hefty sum. Don't ever believe that people can't be bought, because at least Ian, you totally can be bought.
No, I was not paid at all to say that, but I think it's honestly, it's one of those things that I searched high and low. I spent hundreds of $1,000s with consultants. I want to know what's profitable on a regular basis. And it was just like, they'd be like, well, we want you to do this mindset stuff. I'm like, I don't need the mindset stuff. I need to know what's profitable so I can go sell more of it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no amount of DMT that you can do in the Peruvian jungle that's going to make your pizza shop down the street pay you $100,000 for a logo. There's no amount of manifesting that's going to make that come true, unfortunately. I hate to bring it to you guys. All right. Well, with all of that, I am excited for what we're going to talk about today, because, your magic, your zone of genius in talking to you, Ian, is really this understanding of how to really dig below the surface and understand what is important to your clients, how you're impacting them, the transformation that you're creating in their lives, and telling a great story in a way that compels other people to either work with you or to continue to work with you or to stay with you. And I think that's the twist that we want to apply to this today is, how we leverage this understanding of marketing that we do so well to get new clients, but to remember that our existing clients also need to be reminded of these things, and how video and case stories in particular play into that. So with before we get into all that stuff, you mentioned your backstory. Like, what led you to starting video case stories, and why focus on this particular problem?
I mean, it was, the YouTube thing. I knew YouTube was important, right? And video, every time we did video the right way for someone and they used it properly throughout their sales system, we do a lot of YouTube SEO. Not only did it transform when leads came in, right? Leads came in pre-sold. That's what I hear from all my clients. Like, it's so weird. No one believes it until it happens. They're like, everyone feels like they're my friend when they come in, and they're just like, how much is it? They get rid of how much is it, and they say, do you have room for me? Right. And then, I was working with I'd been working with a bunch of clients, and they're all like, they saw the video case stories, and also video case stories ranked higher in YouTube because stories rank higher for a lot of algorithm reasons when they're done properly. Right. You can't use traditional filmmaking storytelling. But when they're done properly, you can rank them higher. And then also we do other videos, about us videos, process videos, FAQs. We do videos. Like, my podcast is a lot of just staying in touch with my clients. And so we do a lot of that stuff. But when we start to get video case stories on the front end and get the data from them, we realized, hey, we can transform how good these are. They went from, about us is the second most used page on the website. It's where people really start to like you. And if you have people the best way to get people like you is have people talk about you. So we moved to starting with video case stories, and I developed this whole process of thinking about your stories, thinking about them ahead of time. I mean, they're so important. You've got to strategize on them, but collect them in one place. And then one thing we do, and we encourage all of our team to do too, and we do on a regular basis, monthly basis internally, is we talk about our stories. Like, what are the successes? What's working? What's really working for our clients? Not just looking at the data, but hearing from our team what's working. And we can put that all in one place and come up with a plan for it. So it becomes much more than just this lead generation thing. It becomes this thing that transforms how you think about your business. And then you can listen to them and go, hey, my clients need this, or my clients need, this is a problem that they have. How can we solve that? And they won't, if you do it through just through surveys instead of an interviewing process and a listening process, it's not the same thing, right? You're not going to get to the heart of the real problems that you're solving. So we solve that, you start to collect those and you start to see it, and you're like, oh, and here's all these other opportunities to help people. So that's kind of the evolution of it. And we've codified it and made it more into systems and more into systems and more into flow charts. I used to do everything in Lucidchart. I had 1,000 of them. And then I think the first time I met you, we were in a group thing, and we start doing Miro, and you're like, bam, 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 boom, 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 boom. I'm like, dude, this guy's good at Miro, and I need to be in Miro. So now I do all these flow charts in Miro, but it's all around like how the stories are told and thinking about that. And and that's where we got to it. And it sounds long convoluted, but story seems so simple on the front end, but it's like fundamentals. It's like, shooting free throws. You got to practice them and got to keep using them and got to keep collecting them.
So, I mean, I'm reading between the lines a little bit here, but it sounds like you kind of arrived at this focus on video case stories through video case stories in this kind of meta way, where the more you did it, the more you realized the impact of it, the more you realized the impact it was having on your clients. And that kind of led you to say, we're really going to focus in on becoming world-class at this thing.
We've listened to our clients, right? And we saw what was working and what had the longest impact. I literally got an email from a client that's like, it's been 10 years since we made these videos. I'm still getting $100,000 clients from them, but I need some more videos. 10 years, right? And it's like, okay, this works, it has big impact. And yeah, it is very meta, which I think the best marketing is.
Well, and you mentioned something earlier, which is, this experience of getting on a call with someone and they feel like they already know you. You've already built this rapport. And like, I have that experience every week. And it still blows me away, to be honest, where I get on with someone and they're like, wow, you look just like you do in your YouTube videos. You sound just like you do on the podcast. And I'm like, yeah, it's because it's really me. I'm that guy. And it really does have such a profound impact on where you start that conversation about, how can we support you? Can we work together, et cetera? So I'm a huge proponent of this philosophy of really kind of building relationships at scale, but doing it through this medium that has so much power to move people. So let's get really specific with that.
Mm-hmm.
We hear the word case studies a lot, but case stories is a different twist. And I think that that's very specific and very intentional language. What is a video case story and why is it so important, not only for acquiring new customers, but also for, retaining and expanding the ones that we already work with?
So I think comes down to the essence of it, because most people will go get a testimonial, right? You can't, if I send my existing clients testimonials, like, Ian's great. They're like, why are you sending this to me? A story has an arc. A story has connection. A story has moments and emotions. And my friend, Dr. Paul Zak, wrote a whole book on the chemistry of storytelling and the importance of having these. And, he went through our system and he's like, he developed an entire technology around measuring the impact of storytelling that was bought by the US government and is used to impact the entire world now. So there's science behind it. But the impact, it's just so strong of a story versus a testimonial, right? Testimonials are usually like, this person's great. Also, when you ask for a testimonial, they're going to talk about you. We don't want them to talk about you. We want them to talk about them and their story. On the flip side, case studies, they're logical, right? They're generally like, we came in, Marcel analyzed our process. We looked at their numbers. We found, that their profitability was low here. Their profitability was high here, which it's great at a certain level. The problem is that what's the last case study you remembered, right? Because we don't remember numbers. It's like me asking you, when did Paul Revere, run down? You don't remember everything about Paul Revere. Probably don't remember the exact time he ran down, and date they ran down through Boston or whatever. But the point being, case studies in general are numbers and logical. Stories are about moments and transformations, right? If you're an agency and you're working with CMOs, right? The numbers are important, right? But it's how you make that CMO look and feel is much more important. Chief Marketing Officer, right? What's the status change? How did you elevate the company, and how did you make, how do they look at the next meeting? That's the story you need to tell, and that's the story you need to find. So stories have emotion and moments, which seem so fluffy, but that's what we decide upon. Just complete, if you want to go science on it. Paul Zak, in one of the studies, he showed a video that was flat, meaning was essentially a case study video about a child. And then he showed him a case story video, a story-driven video that had a lot of emotion and a big emotional arc. And then afterwards asked people to donate to something completely unrelated. And he's done this study multiple times. It's like something like a 70 to 80% lift, just because of the levels of oxytocin and cortisol that they're delivering to your body because of a story. And now it gets back into science, and I bore people, but that's the difference. Case studies are generally logical. Testimonials are generally about you. Case stories about them and their journey and their problems and their transformations and how they felt about it.
So I think this is really insightful. There's something you said that really resonated with me, which is testimonials are going to be about you, but the case stories are going to be about the customer. The customer is the hero. And I think that's really profound because, to your point, if this is an asset that you also want to use to kind of re-engage or remind the clients that you have that maybe on their journey to that transformation, that maybe, started a process with you to get to a certain outcome, but they're in that messy middle part that, everybody has to go through. They're month 4 into an 8-month website project. Like that's a very turbulent time for a client. And so being able to see a story about somebody that has accomplished the transformation that they also want to go through allows them to see themselves in it. And I think that is, it's a little detail, but it really resonates. And I think it, to your point, it really is profound. And it's an important piece of why this perspective is important, of focusing it on a story and focusing on making your customer the hero of that story.
Oh yeah. So important, because it's like, especially in agency world, you get little big wins in which you should find, right? And you should tell them, and you should have stories about each of the milestones, but there's definite buyer's remorse, right? And you got that first 100 days of like, is this going to work? And that's so important to market to those people, because if they're thinking it's not going to work, not only, I mean, coming back to the profitability side, right? If they don't believe you, they're going to fight you. So you're going to spend a whole lot more time and money on all sorts of calls, right? I love is, we had a few clients, we just sent over a huge, like 8-minute video that took us, a long time. And they're like, this is awesome. Let's use it. You know why they said this is awesome? Because they believed in our work, right? They believed it was going to work. And they said it was awesome, because otherwise they could have been like, let's have 25 phone calls about this. And I'm sure you can tell me about the profitability numbers when you have to have tons of revisions, especially on something complex. So if they don't believe you, and then if they don't believe you along the way, now they take more time, but then they're critiquing everything that happens afterwards on the negative side. So, and then on top of it, if you're not overcoming that buyer's remorse, there's other people selling to your current clients that you just spent all this money. Because most of us, I remember, like, most of my clients, I'm not profitable until like 6 months in, right, to 8 months in, right? So if I lose them at 6 months in, I'm losing, not only not making money, I'm losing money. So there's someone else ready to take your client. So we've got to keep inspiring them and exciting them and getting them to trust us. Sorry, I went on a rant there, but I think it's this important thing that no one really thinks about.
And the other thing that you mentioned too, and this is absolutely true about us, is every time we have one of these stories and we share it with the team, like, I am constantly underestimating the impact that has on our team and how much that lights them up, because not everybody on the team even has like a position where they're interfacing with clients and they're kind of getting this positive feedback loop that the work that they do matters and impacts people. So that's another, I think, very easy to overlook utility of having these kind of assets being consistently produced in the business.
Yeah. I mean, your team retention is such, we talk about client retention, and it's such a valid point that you made. Team retention, the cost of churning a team member is a huge cost, right? And the reason people are going to stay if they're making enough money, and the number one reason I guess people stay at work, this is a study, I don't know for a fact, but it seems pretty factful, is they have a friend at work. So that's something you got to work on, but also that they have a cause that they're fighting for. Because like, if you just, for you get excited if you're like, hey, we just uncovered $1 million in EBITDA over the past 2 years for this agency. But to someone on your team, I'm like, they got another $1 million. Where do I get? But if you show the impact it had on that agency owner and the agency owner's life, a lot of people can get into that.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. And with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. So I think we're clear now on what is a case story. Why is that story component important? What are some of the fundamental tenets that make it good and powerful and moving? And what are some of the practical applications, in particular, beyond just acquiring new clients, but really kind of retaining, expanding existing clients, retaining team? The next question is, how do you go about creating these and making that a consistent flywheel in the business?
Well, that's such an important question, and great use of the word flywheel, because if you really look at every business, it's built on listening to the customer. I mean, Apple is the perfect example, right? If you really look at the transformation of Apple, and especially just narrow it down to the iPhone, right? It was never intended to be the App Store, and it was not expected to have all these apps, was not expected to be the best camera ever, but listening to customers and going, hey, seeing how they're using it. Now, Steve Jobs is famous saying, I don't listen to what customers say. He paid attention to what they did, and paid very close attention to what they did. So constantly improving and capturing those stories, right? Because I remember when all of a sudden there's like, there's an app for that. Right? All of a sudden that wasn't intended for the first 2 years. We listened to the stories and got the stories and built them and built them and built them. So that's a flywheel effect. And you find this in any great business where they slowly whittle off pieces that don't work and charge more and get better at the pieces that do. So you do that, you install it by first knowing your goals, right? It's pretty simple, but you got to know what the best, I always talk about the best storyteller, and the best storyteller knows what they want the story to do. I get on and people are like, oh, I want this case story, right? And people come to us. I'm like, well, what do you want it to do? 18 months from now, what do you want it to do? And they're like, It's like, well, because the story that we're going to tell, and we need to transform someone. And then we got to look also, we go through our stories and go, which ones of these clients do we love to work with and are going to help us accomplish these goals? Which of these, and we go through our clients first and we talk about them. I have this tool called the Case Story Tackle Box, and a process for actually selecting these stories, doing this whole process. If anyone just, hops on, message me on LinkedIn, I'll send you over. It's on LinkedIn, in my LinkedIn newsletter, but it shows how to select your stories, right? So selecting which customers we're going to talk about, and then talk about what's their story. Because you wouldn't go into, a journalist doesn't go into, a journalistic interview blind. They do research, right? They plan out what they want, where they want to go with the conversation. So you plan it out. Their connection, conflict, conclusion, first big wins. We know where we want to go. And you collect all this data, and then you craft questions, and then you interview them. This is the other thing that a lot of people want to skip. We all want to go into automation. We want to use some video software that's going to ask people. We're human beings. That's why this works, right? That's why you didn't send me a list of questions and say, Ian, answer these questions. You're going to be on the podcast. We have conversations. And so we have a conversation. Once we get that conversation down, we do a thing called the case story investigation. We review the conversation. We look at the angles that there's in there, the hooks that we can use. What are the aha moments? What are the keywords that they said? And let's say we want more client retention. Maybe it's a new service and you do a story about that service, or maybe it's someone who, accelerated really fast because they really dove in. So then we use that right away, and we look at the impact and we go, okay, how do we find more of those stories? And just install in the process at least once a quarter, talk about your customer stories.
So what I really love here is the connection, conflict, conclusion framework. The one that I always used was situation, struggle, solution, but very similar, right? That's the arc of any good story, right? So like, what was going on? What was the challenge? And then what was the solution? But I think the magic in my experience is really in all the things that you talked about. It's the preparation, because it's the questions we ask underneath those, digging into the specifics, that really unlock the magic in these stories. It's very similar to a sales conversation where, you ask somebody, for example, like, oh, you haven't been profitable for the last 2 years. How much does that cost you? And they'll give you a number. But the really important question is like, how do you feel about that? How has that impacted you? Right? Like, how does your business partner feel about that? How does your family feel about that? Like, what have you not been able to do because you don't have the profit, the cash flow to do it? Those are the important questions. And I think the same is true when we're talking about both the conflict and the conclusion when we're interviewing someone in the case study, or a case story. Sorry, very specific language here. I think that's such an important piece, is like that arc is going to be the macro thing that our human brain is going to latch onto. But these moments you're talking about, those come down to the lines of questioning. It comes down to how you run that interview, I think.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. But also there's a magic that happens every time we do, like, so when you talk about three or four, that's why we have this tackle box pieces, because when you sit and talk about 3 or 4 to 10 of your clients at once, you start to see patterns, right? That you don't see when you just talk about one client. Usually when we talk about one client, I know I was talking to one of my clients, and like, well, here's a problem they had. I'm like, but is that really a problem? Is that really a universal problem? Because if we try and solve for a problem that most people don't have, that's we shouldn't be doing that. But when you're talking like 10 people have this problem that we solved that we didn't know we were solving, wow, that's a huge new opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what I'm hearing here is there's component one, which is have this process for periodically going through your client list, on really understanding what the stories are, reverse engineering that, picking them, interviewing them, etc. But there's this other process that's happening at somewhat of a more macro level, which is periodically going back and looking at all those case stories and looking for the patterns within them and seeing what insight you can draw from the commonalities in what they're describing and the transformations they're experiencing.
Yeah, we just worked with one agency, and this is really important for the profitability level. Everyone we talk to uses this word trust, right? And level of trust. Now, if you put on your web agency website, you can trust us, people are gonna be like, yeah, that's like, sure. Because the only people that say you can trust me are people that you can't trust. But if you have those hooks that accompany that angle of trust, like, they came back to us and told us when they were doing something wrong, they replaced it, they fixed it, they were ahead of it. And you've got that hook. Now we can talk through that level of trust. And what is that talking about that hook and that angle and working on that trust, and then displaying that to your current clients goes, oh yeah, we can really trust them. We need, when things are going bad, they're going to fix it, because we all have issues, right? And if you're running ads, you have issues every day. If you have SEO, I mean, that's why I don't do so much SEO anymore. It's like you wake up in the morning, it's like, did Google just change everything? And so that level of trust is important. So finding those patterns and finding those angles and really using them in your conversations is important. And I talk about video, but when we talk about the stories, then we remember the stories, and then our team remembers the stories, and then they tell the stories too. So there's that meta level of it, talking again about them knowing the stories so they can talk about it.
The last thing I want to double click on here is, okay, let's assume we go through and we create these really compelling case stories. Obviously, there's the sales side of things, acquiring new customers, but where do you see these most effectively being used? And something you mentioned at the top of the conversation is, if you do the stories the right way and then you use them in the right way, they'll have a great impact. What are some of the key tenets to making sure you get as much value out of these as possible and they have the biggest impact?
So I mentioned I'm big into YouTube, right? And if you have other videos like you do on YouTube, you have your about us, you have FAQs, you have like recent, like stuff that's relevant to your clients. You should be sending your clients to those videos on YouTube, but also like your wins and your case stories. Like, hey, here's someone just like you who had a recent win. It reconfirms that. And now if the client had that recent win, a lot of times they'll comment on that YouTube video. But you're doing something else that's really, really important. You're feeding YouTube your current clients and going, hey, I want to show more of my videos to these people, and I want to find more people like them because they're going to watch more of this. And now your videos are, the more we send them to YouTube, the more they're going to see your face, hear your voice, and the more they're going to trust you. And also the more you're going to edify your current clients, and they're going to feel like they know them. I can't tell you how many times I use this in my process all the time. I'm like, oh, my client XY, is doing this and it's leading to this. In a casual conversation, I'm going to send you a video about it afterwards. And then I'm like, oh yeah, here's the video I mentioned and here's what they did. They watch the video. I've had clients like 3 or 4 years later go, oh, how's so-and-so doing, right? How's Doug doing? They feel like they know them and they feel like they're part of a community. So just, definitely emailing them out. Well, clients are like, how do I get more traffic to my YouTube channel? I'm like, are you sending the YouTube videos to your clients? They're like, no. I'm like, there's a great way. But just getting in the habit of talking about story and then go, hey, here's that story I mentioned. I think that's the simplest thing you can do.
It's interesting because I've had that conversation with people in the past as well. And then when you double click on the hesitation to send this to their existing clients, the realization is that, oh, the content's not actually valuable. So it's like, if you, you know what I mean? Like if you didn't feel like you were actually being helpful by sending it out, then maybe the content strategy needs to get reevaluated, which is kind of back to the fundamentals.
Yeah. You tell a great story, people want to watch the story. It's just,
again, especially if it's relevant to them, like it's the journey and the transformation they want to go through.
Yep.
So Ian, we've talked about a lot of things here today, and I'm sure there's some people listening that would love to get more in your world, get access to some of the free resources that you published, and there are a lot of them. So we're going to have some links in the show notes to a couple of things, your podcast, your book. We'll also try to find Dr. Paul Zak and his book that you mentioned. Sounds really interesting. Your LinkedIn, so people get the tackle box, and I'll also leave a link to Miro. If for anybody that doesn't know what it is, this is the tool that Ian and I guess now are both using to whiteboard all the crazy things that happen in our brain. Is there anything else that we should include there for people to check out?
Yeah, I mean, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, I will send you over the case story selector process. And there's another thing I do in there, and it's the 100K client visualizer. Because you have to dream, not just think about the case stories that you have, but the case story you want. And so there's a process I go through of thinking about who are those clients you really want to work with and what can you do to help them.
Awesome. So we'll leave some notes on that down below, as well as a link to Ian's LinkedIn, so you can reach out to him and get access to those resources. And with that, Ian, I just want to thank you for making the time, man. It's good to have you on the show and to catch up.
Marcel, thank you so much. It was great being here.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.